And they both pointed the guns at me as if to say, like, bang, bang. And I remember thinking at the time, threaten me for what? And then that was my mindset.
I know at that point your life was also, I've heard you use the words, crumbling around you. How'd you manage that?
In all honesty, I don't really know that I did. Thrive in the darkness, and I always have, and it's not a healthy darkness either.
Today's guest is the legendary boxing journalist Tris Dixon. Tris is an esteemed author, journalist, podcaster in his own right, but more than that, he's a really, really lovely and inspiring man. Tris is so open with his struggles. Tris talks to me about the suicidal thoughts he's had his entire life and still has to this day. He tells me about going to America and sleeping under a bridge to keep his boxing dream alive. It's a crazy, crazy, yet wonderful and inspiring story. Please get ready, listen up, learn from this great, great man. Right, let's get stuck in. Tris Dixon, award-winning author, broadcaster, muscle man, amazing father, wonderful husband. How the bloomin' hell are you, mate?
I'm doing well. I'm really flattered to be invited to be here because obviously we go back a while. You've been a guest on my podcast, and yeah, I mean, with all the people that you could have selected, I think I'm suffering from imposter syndrome today.
No way. I hate that, actually, and we can talk about it. But let's start with this. I get frustrated when people, you have an unbelievable story. And I've known you for 10, 12 years. We became friends, I think, like 4 or 5 years ago when I left boxing and was forced to retire from boxing. Like, our friendship really developed. We spent a lot of time with each other over the last few years. Mate, you are a phenomenal human being. And it annoys me when people put themselves down. Like, that's a very British thing, isn't it? Americans, they love building themselves up. And we both spent a lot of time in America. In the UK, we put ourselves down. You're a phenomenal human being. You've done so much stuff, and I'm so proud to have you on the podcast to share some of your experiences because, as I said, like, this is called Getting Back Up, where I'll talk to people with amazing stories, very inspiring people. You very much deserve to be here, mate, and I cannot wait to be inspired by your story and my listeners be inspired by your story, mate.
Thanks, mate. I think that it comes from, obviously I'm just a civilian and I speak to world champion boxers, Olympians like yourself. And I have always had great reverence for fighters, which is why I do what I do. And it's weird and surreal to be sat around talking to them. Even last week, I was sat with Johnny Nelson and Scott Welch and just thinking, like, how is this just like a normal conversation? And I'm sort of a part of it and, almost seen as accepted, if not an equal. I don't know. We just managed to sit down and chat like we're doing now, and it's surreal. It's just surreal, but it's nice, and I never take it for granted.
Good, and you say that. I listened to some podcasts to research you for this podcast today, and listened to a very good one called Bottled Up Blokes, which I recommend people go and listen to. And they had you on, and then you left, and then the two chaps that were talking could not believe they had you on their podcast. I don't know if you heard that or not, but they were saying, Tris is such a nice guy. He was interviewing Conor Ben yesterday. Now he's talking to us. I can't believe it. So you also have this aura, which I don't think you realise you have. So, mate, be very proud of yourself. You've done some amazing things in your life. We're going to talk all about it, the trials and tribulations. I want to start with something which is going to be a bit shocking. A number of years ago, you were in a gym and you had a chat with a fella and you were talking about he was telling you about his story and you were going through a very bad time in your life at the time. And then you said subsequently that he could have been telling your story. You went home a few hours later, put the telly on, and that man that was trying to open up to you had thrown himself in front of a train. And I used to say committed suicide. The correct word is completed suicide. Because committed, for those people that want to understand that, I learned that very recently. Committed suicide is an old-fashioned statement when suicide was classed as a crime. You commit a crime, you commit suicide. The correct term is completed suicide. When you put the telly on that day and you saw that young man or that man had killed himself, how did that make you feel?
Not great. We had met. It was between Christmas and New Year, 2010, and it's fair to say my life was crumbling at the seams at that point, to the point where I was having daily suicidal thoughts myself. And when this chap spoke to me in the gym, he was clearly in need of help and support because he was going through the exact same thing that I was, a marriage breakup that was really not pleasant. Not that there is such thing as a pleasant breakup, I guess. But we just experienced the same things. And the thing was, because of, my relationship was still not actually over. Like I hadn't really made a call as to where I was going to go. So I didn't confide in him the way he confided in me. And I kept it to myself, and I could have related to him and said, oh, look, we're in the same boat and all this kind of stuff, and really helped him identify with something that we're going through the same thing. And instead I was just like, oh, I'm really sorry for you. Like, that's terrible. I'm always here if you need anything, let's meet up for a drink and all the rest of it. And so, yeah, it made me feel absolutely terrible because, had he realized that not only is he not alone, but someone's in the exact same boat as him, that, it could have changed something. So, yeah, it's been a while since I thought about that. It's given me some goosebumps, but yeah, it takes me back. And yeah, it was really, really sad. And the guy was like so many blokes in our demographic, which is a high suicide risk. He's one of those guys from the outside looking in. You'd be like, oh, always smiling, always got a nice word for someone, always says hello, always got something to say. Big Saints fan, up the Saints. And yeah, so you would never have been able to tell the trauma that he was experiencing if you didn't know him. But he sort of shared it with me. But I didn't clearly give him enough hope or optimism that he could continue when the way things worked out. I could have and should have done things differently.
But what did you learn from that lesson, that life lesson?
Oh God, that's a tough one, because it was obviously a time capsule where I did what I did for other people's benefit. I was trying to look after people close to me, so I tried to be quite insular with that. And I suppose going off on a slight tangent, I've always found a peculiar high in isolating myself and keeping everything bottled up. I like the burden and I like the darkness to the places it takes me. I like it. I thrive in the darkness, and I always have. And it's not a healthy darkness either. Like, I don't want to live there, but there's something appealing about going there. It's a unique thing. And I think one of the ways I address that now is by training on my own, in the sense that it allows me to go into a dark mindset while producing the feel-good chemicals that keep me balanced from giving into the darkness.
Mate, the juxtaposition of what you've just now said is really quite I've got goosebumps. Wow.
But I think, I was talking about this to another boxing writer, Elliot Wurzel, recently on the podcast. And, some of the best writers thrive in darkness and loneliness and cutting themselves off. Like, I do have this dream of having a house overlooking water and being able to write and having solitude and, being able to write until I'm sort of 80, 90 years old, still churning out books, and looking over a calm sea or a lake or something, where I can be by myself and alone with my thoughts. Yeah, like that's a dream. Like, and I think some people thrive in solitude and some people absolutely hate it. But I think there's a certain strength in knowing that, if you're on your own, you're going to be okay.
Success is defined as an accomplishment of an aim or purpose. That's what the dictionary says. What is success to you, Tris?
Success is reaching goals and hitting targets and markers. And I think, in life and business and whatever you choose to do, like you need to break it down to short, medium, and long-term goals. Obviously, you know, when people do fall short, they're generally going straight for a long-term goal and not looking to plan their way there or structure it. I was lucky that certain doors opened at certain times while obviously having to be at the right place at the right time.
Lucky or fortunate, I think there's a difference there.
Yeah, a little bit of both. I suppose it's one of those things that I tell people now in terms of boxing, right? And if you keep knocking, sometimes a door will open. Obviously, don't knock to the point where you're winding everyone up and annoying everyone. But occasionally knock and just say you're still there. But I think success is the ability to draw up these goals and have them in your mind's eye and to see them through. You know, it's obviously easy to become disheartened if things aren't working. You know, before I got a break in any kind of journalism, you know, I was trying to make things work in boxing from like 2000 to 2003 just to get into boxing. I ended up with a load of freelance articles for Boxing News that allowed me to form some sort of haphazard portfolio of work that I sent off to local papers and tried to apply for jobs. And I remember I got like hundreds of job rejections. Every Saturday and Monday, there was a Media Guardian section in The Guardian. It had all the media jobs. And I've kept all those letters of rejection. There's like 150. One came from Piers Morgan, signed when he was the editor of The Mirror, saying, oh, you know, and to be fair, he's one of the few guys that did get back to me. He said, oh, you know, sorry, we haven't got any openings at the minute, but if you try this. And he gave me another alternative, which was great because a lot of the answers were just dead ends. But you've got to keep trying, right? Like, and you've got to keep, you do have to keep knocking on the door. And I think part of the problem is now in the social media age, which I wasn't in then at the time, you know, everyone expects instant success and instant gratification. And I do see it with my kids now. Like they see a trick in football or something that they see online and they go to the garden and they'll try and do it and they'll become disheartened because they can't do it. But they haven't seen the 1,000 hours that people have put into trying to pull these tricks off. Or, you know, every time they shoot at the goal and it's not gone in off the crossbar or in the top corner, they're a little bit downhearted when it just goes in the goal anyway because everyone's used to these highlight clips. You know, but you've got to put in the graft to get there, to get that to that point where you can do it every time. And so, you know, short, medium, long-term goals are the way to do it. And it's about seeing them through and having that perseverance, sometimes courage, and definitely the desire to want to do it.
100 million %. 100%. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Ogogo Fitness. Ogogo Fitness is my brand new fitness app I'll be launching really, really soon. I've created this app so I truly want to help people. I believe everybody should have the right to exercise and be fit and be healthy. I've brought this to the world to promote physical health and mental health. I've designed 60 preset 7-minute workouts ranging in difficulty from round 1, which is pretty easy, to round 12, which is really, really challenging. As well as that, I've got my personal workout builder. I've created 50 different exercises and you have the choice to create your own playlist from the 50 different workouts, which gives you an option of over 80 million combinations of workouts. 80 million. So from your Ogogo Fitness app, you can literally choose from millions and millions and millions of workouts personalized for you and what you're training for. So head over to ogogofitness.com, register your interest, and be the first to know when Ogogo Fitness is launching. Tris, you sit here before me, and I go about 16.5 stone, 104 kilos. I'm 6'2". I feel like I'm quite the specimen.
You are.
No. But then I see you and go, oh man, I got to get in the gym. I got to not have chocolate powder on my cappuccino when they offer it to me. Mate, you are an unbelievable specimen of a person. I wasn't going to say this, but I noticed you when we met downstairs just then and how you sit. You sit quite small. Do you know you do that? Do you know you make yourself almost less than you are? Is that a conscious thing? Is that a subconscious thing?
So there's two things. There's one, I've never actually said this publicly, but I don't like being big. Like I would love to be like 10 kilos less. I've told her, I told my friends and my wife and stuff.
If you're giving it away, I'll have it. I'll take it. I'll take the triceps, the shoulders.
Like in the first lockdown, like I got down to like, I think it was 99.7 kilos, and it was the lowest I'd been for like 15 years. And it was really, really tough and like really challenging. I'm just a big dude, and I have no desire, particularly as I get older with the training I do, like with CrossFit and a lot of gymnastics and weightlifting. Like I am stronger, better, fitter, faster, and more mobile when I am leaner and lighter. But to start chipping under 100 kilos is real grind. In terms of being smaller, I mean, the only thing, the Sheffield boys, Galahad and Kelbrook and all that, they always say like, you don't look very big, like when you got your clothes on. Not that I've taken, but obviously in terms of Instagram and social media, they're like, you don't look like that. And I mean, I don't know if I consciously do it, but I don't know. I definitely don't see myself as a big dude or a guy that's massively in shape. I think I'm in good nick for my age, 44 years old and training. But also like with the type of training I do, I'm okay, but like I'm not elite. Do you know what I mean? Like the elite CrossFitters and the best guys at my age group are, on another level to me. Like not even another level, but stratosphere is different to me. So, it's hard to think you're this and you're this good and you're awesome in that when you're actually getting your butt handed to you by loads of other people around the world.
Comparison's the thief of joy, isn't it? I think you should look at yourself and be very proud of where you are.
I love that saying. And I do use it. But I think the thing is I use it for motivation. I use it for motivation. And again, going back to that bit of the darkness, thinking you're not quite good enough and you're not up to scratch and that there's more work to do. Why not? Why not use it as fuel to the fire to make yourself better?
You struggle with body dysmorphia, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who doesn't. Like you.
Only when I see
said,
you.
Like,
only when I scroll and see Tris Dixon doing press ups.
I don't know who doesn't, but yeah, I mean, like, and do you know what as well? There was when I hit that 99.7 kilos, right? It was in a lockdown, and I put up a picture on Instagram, and I was like. And I look back at it a couple of years on, and I've never really got massively out of shape because I always train. But there's sometimes where I and I can't cut 52 weeks a year. I don't need to. Like life's too short. Like if I go out with the kids and they want to share a dessert, then let's go for it. Do you know what I mean? Like there's priorities in life, and a bit of good food goes a long way psychologically as well. Like as a reward or treat. I don't like to say that, but just in terms of just enjoying life. But yeah, I look back on that picture and I was like, this was at the start of the year. I'm like, oh my God, can I get back to that? And then I like took a picture of where I was at the time, and I was like thinking, oh my God, I don't feel that close. And then I thought, actually, I filtered the living Jesus out of that picture. I didn't even look like that then. I made it black and white, turned the structure up and all the rest of it. And I was like, geez, I'm trying to be something I wasn't even then. So yeah, I think
the comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah, and I think, but the body dysmorphia thing does go back, obviously, to childhood, and me wanting to train because, as we sit here now, I'm 44. I've been training 30 years. I literally remember my first actual training session, which was 30 years ago, and I'd gone up to Manchester for a relative's funeral, and I was staying in a hotel with my mum and dad, and they weren't at all gym people, but there was a gym in the hotel, and I went down to the gym because there was nothing else to do, and I used some of the weights, just like the weights machines, and I was like, this feels pretty good, and so so subsequently I never really stopped, but there obviously was a period at boarding school where, at that age, it doesn't really matter what training you're doing. If you don't grow and your body doesn't develop, as teenagers do, whether it's like getting taller, going through puberty and everything else, like you do get puppy fat. And I ended up getting puppy fat. And then, to make things worse, I was quite a sporty kid, but then I snapped both Achilles tendons. And so I couldn't get around and was on crutches for a period of time. So then the puppy fat got worse. And then obviously I had no idea about nutrition and training and everything like that. And then I ended up getting teased at school. I remember now, walking across a square at my private school at the time, and someone shouted, "Here comes Mr. Wibbly Wobbly." And I remember thinking at the time, the guy that was saying that was a bit chunky himself. And I'm thinking, geez, if he's saying it to me, how bad have I got? And I'm like, this just isn't good. So anyway, this is kind of really where, there was no going back from that. Like, and I also remember, like, at that school, we had mandatory swimming lessons. And you had to wear these little black budgie smugglers, which I know is a great look for you from Splash and everything else. although can you imagine me going to the school ones in gold? But we had these little black budgie smugglers, and like I was literally every time we had the swimming lesson, like whatever it was, Wednesday mornings, I was going to the sanatorium, the doctors, and saying, "Look, I'm feeling really unwell. I don't think I should get in the pool." I felt fine. I was just shit scared about going in there and everyone seeing me, short little fat kid, hadn't developed, and just people thinking, "Oh my God, like, look at him." And obviously no one gave a shit. I didn't think that. But then going back to the nutrition thing was, like, I was starving myself then. Like, I wasn't going into breakfast because I didn't want everyone to say, "Oh, what's the chunky guy going to have?" Because if they're calling me Mr. Wibbly Wobbly to my face, what are they saying behind my back? So I wasn't going there. Lunch, I would maybe just pick at, and then dinner I try and avoid as well. And I just didn't know that I was slowing my metabolism right down. It got to the point where once I came off crutches, my school was on Salisbury Plain, and it was like, I always remember I would go to bed watching, like, I had a little portable TV, which we weren't allowed, and I would watch like Sports Night, and I'd be watching the boxing, and I'd be watching some of the football highlights if there was an FA Cup game or something late on BBC, and be inspired by those guys, and then set my clock for like 4 a.m. so I could get up and start running, or, depending on the season, if it was lighter earlier, I'd be getting up earlier. And I would go out running in Salisbury Plain, creep out through the bedroom window, which was only on the ground floor anyway, and I'd run Salisbury Plain, and there was a really long track up the back of the school, and I didn't know the area, so I would just run up and down that track, which was about a mile each way, until pretty much daybreak. And then I'd get back and I'd just do as many push-ups and sit-ups. I didn't know anything else. Like, I didn't know any kind of other exercise. I didn't know that you could squat or anything like that. So I'd just do push-ups and sit-ups. And do you know what the annoying thing was? I did that at the school for about a year, and I was doing all that stuff and nothing changed. And I was like, oh my God, like, what's the point? Like, why am I doing all this work? I'm still a short little fat kid who no one likes. And I'm putting on all this graft. And I left that school after my GCSEs in the summer. Was really pleased to be out of there because I was just...
You hated school, right?
That private school was, apart from my divorce, that private school was probably the worst years of my life. Hated it. And a big reason of that was because I hated myself the entire time as well. And then I left
Where did that come from?
It probably came from being, how I looked, but also, like, I was just so unpopular. I didn't have one friend, like literally one friend. Like,
the story, you got to tell the story. You got to tell the story.
So, I can't actually, if someone says you haven't got a friend in the world, like, I literally had no friends. I actually went there with friends to that school, and I actually lost them as friends while I was there because they became popular, and I just became...
You're such a nice bloke. I don't get it. You're such a nice...
The thing is, I'm relatively self-confident now, but I'm always introverted, right? And when
the way you sit, you're closed off.
Yeah, and I am just introverted, like, and I've never been confident, like overconfident, and never been sort of rambunctious or anything like that.
Which is really surprising because, like, I think people would think you were. And I don't know why, because I guess because of the jobs you've had, the things you've done in your life, I think my perception is like, oh yeah, he's like, life is great for him.
Yeah,
which is the total wrong perspective.
I think the introversion has cost me a lot in my career. The fact that I haven't gone after jobs and positions, and I see people that I do think, and I hope I don't come across as really bad saying this, but do have less talent than me, have got better gigs than me. And I'm like, but then I don't put myself out. It's not because I'm afraid to, it's because I don't think I'm all that. And so therefore I shouldn't be out there shouting the odds and saying, oh yeah, I should get that job. And, I just think, oh, well, that's life. And if the phone rings, I'll pick it up. And if it doesn't, then, crack on. I'm obviously just trying to do me. But I know you're getting around to that story about me being the bottom of the barrel. And what happened was at boarding school, you had to write a list of like 1 to 30 of the people that you wanted to share a dormitory with. And I'm like, I could put the popular kids at the top, but then I know that no one's going to like want to be with me. Like I'm either 29th or 30th on every list, whatever it is, maybe 31st out of 30. And I'm thinking this just is not going to work well. And so like, I think I didn't make up names, but I just made up an order. I was like, it just doesn't, I may as well start the list at 28. Do you know what I mean? But you had to fill in the forms and whatever. And I kind of thought like I'd maybe be down to actually I didn't think bottom 5, mate. I knew. And I knew that it was going to be me and this other kid. And sure enough, me and this other kid got stuck in a room together. And I was like, well, I saw it coming. And I was like, I was gutted because it reinforces like, no one likes me, bottom of the barrel. And no one liked me for anything I'd done because I didn't speak to anyone. Because I had no one to talk to. So then I'm in this room with this guy who like I thought, he's possibly the only one more unpopular than me. I'm not even sure that he was, maybe he did have a mate. But anyway, long story short is I think we were obviously both frustrated teenagers and it got to the point where we were winding each other up. Obviously, if you share a room with someone, you're just going to cross paths with them, rub them up the wrong way at some point. And one of us said something to the other, and I thought, fuck it, you're having it. You're having it, mate. Like, I'm not the bottom of the barrel. And I thought, it's on. And I went to fight him with every ounce of my being. And I thought, if anyone's getting a shoe in today, it's your turn, sunshine.
I feel like I'm watching a Guy Ritchie movie.
And I go up to him, and I tried to grab him around the neck. He pushes me to the ground, starts rubbing my face in the carpet, so I've got a little carpet burn on my face. And I'm thinking, this isn't how it worked in my mind's eye. And I was like, oh, shit, I can't get out of it. He's too strong. And he was on top of me, forcing my face into the carpet. And I'm like, this is the lowest ebb. This is it. This is it. I am literally the bit of gum on someone's shoe. And
with a carpet burn on your cheek.
Yeah, exactly. And that was it. And that was like, I'd love to say it was like a come to Jesus moment. I'm like going to strive to be better and all the rest of it, but it wasn't. It just reinforced that I was a little piece of shit that no one liked. And and that was it really. And it's funny now. I think, had life not worked out the way it's gone, had I not started training and feeling better about myself and being a bit more confident, like that could have been really jarring. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't even a life lesson. Like it was just a shit day. Do you know what I mean?
An exclamation mark on unhappy childhood.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, and it's funny to talk about an unhappy childhood. I didn't have an unhappy childhood in terms of like family and that. My mum and dad were together, although there were obviously parts in any long relationship where you think, oh my God, it would be better if they weren't. But fortunately, we never went down that route. My brother was 4 years older than me. He's always sort of looked out to me, but then he's travelled the world loads when I was sort of that age and could have done with someone being around a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it was what it was. And, when I talk about the darkness and stiffening that resolve and being on my own, maybe that's where a lot of it comes from, from being isolated and being used to being on my own from like the age of 13 through to 16. Like that's what it felt like. And now I think, fuck it. Do you know what I mean? Like if I'm on my own, I'm good with that.
Boxing. When, why and how did you fall in love with boxing? To dedicate your entire life to it. You've done so much good in the sport, which you're going to come to later. But those first moments, when, why and how did you fall in love?
Good segue, because I mentioned putting in all that work and all that effort and my body not changing. Well, I left that school with my GCSEs, scraped through, got 9 Cs. And that summer, right, my brother went away traveling. And so say it was from June onwards, he came back in like the September, October time. I'd found my way to the boxing gym in like the May time, sort of. So this is about May 95. And I was playing rugby. I was always a decent rugby player. Even when I was a short, fat kid, I had decent technique and liked to tackle and played county rugby and stuff. And I remember I was playing for Salisbury, and one of my friends, Ryan Naish, who went on to be a para and now is a trainer, he said, "Why don't you come to the boxing club for fitness?" And I mean, I had watched like Ben McClellan. I remember like where I was that night, and I've watched the Eubank days. I was a big fan of Tyson coming through and all that, like a lot of kids of that generation. But I went to the boxing club, and the funny thing about that was I've got 2 pictures of me in those early days of the boxing club. And one, I'm like a short kid who's not quite so fat anymore. And then like literally it must be like 2 months later, or certainly months later, and this is the difference between me finishing my GCSEs and my brother going away, and then my brother coming back and me, you know, being a regular at the boxing club. He comes back and I'm like 6 foot, got a 6-pack, grown, developed, and one of the bigger guys in the gym that they were chucking me in with heavyweights and stuff. And in that period of time, I just filled out, grew, and was so different. And then when I start my new school or college, everyone's like, "Oh my God, like, how long have you been training?" I'm like, obviously all those days in the darkness have been paying off. And then I remember it was like,
as you talk, I can see that meme on Instagram where like there's 2 people burying for diamonds, and they're chipping away, and one guy is right there, and then he stops and walks back, and one guy is still going. It's like never give up.
Yeah.
Never give up. Don't get disheartened by immediate results. That instant gratification you mentioned earlier. It's like always keep going, because happiness is there if you keep going.
Yeah, for sure. And so when my brother came back, it was funny because he came back with a beard and was like, and long hair, and was like, "Ha, you didn't recognize me?" And I was like, "Ha, you didn't recognize me." And the thing was, I was like a head taller than him. So he'd gone away, he came back, and I was a head taller and a bloke. Do you know what I mean? Like, so the boxing thing, like, you know, that sort of, the training came from there. And then obviously there's loads of things that it helped with. Like, obviously coming out of that period at school, like, why wouldn't it help with my self-respect? Knowing that I was handling myself in the gym and that I could actually fight now. Do you know what I mean? And that my body had changed, like, and that it was because I wanted to train for boxing, I was then running. You know, I was running all the time, and you know,
how do you
go with that?
After step
yes, but they were fine. Well, yeah, but it was in terms of the running and in terms of the training, it was the structure and the discipline and the routine, and this is what boxing gave me that I still carry with me today, and that's what it helped shape, and that's why like I'm a huge advocate for boxing in schools, and you know, I'm all for everyone doing it. Obviously, the head trauma maybe not so much, but we might get to that, but. But yeah, so the boxing thing, like and then like my coach Ray Sparrow was just a hard dude. Like he was on the doors because I ended up doing the doors for about 10 years, and he was on the doors for like the generation before me, and I really looked up to him. We had a really good set of lads in our gym as well. In I think it was the 2001 ABAs, we had two finalists. Vince Jones, who was in the forces, got to the finals and lost to Courtney Fry, and Henry Castle beat Steve Bell in the ABA final. That was at the Barnsley Metrodome. So we had 2 kids from our gym, like a little old West Country gym, make it to the ABA finals. We had a guy there, Marco Gassemi, who's now part of Tyson Fury setup. Like I did hundreds of rounds with Marco, and now he's still like giving Tyson rounds. So we had a really good gym, and like when you look back at those guys, generally as well, like we've got another guy there, Owen Toms, who's got a huge CrossFit box in Amesbury, Southern Quarter, which like doing huge things like nationally. Like there was a lot of real ambition and desire in that gym, and when you look at it, like a lot of those guys became successful afterwards. Yeah. And I think it's from the structure, the self-respect, the respect for each other that we were all given, you know, as those guys between the age of like 16 and 20.
The lessons you learned, maybe you didn't all go off to become champions in boxing, but the lessons you learned from boxing meant you went off and become champions outside in life.
Yeah, it's life lessons, isn't it? It's life lessons, and it's how to carry yourself, and it's respect for yourself and respect for others.
And that takes you so far.
Yeah, and like you can have a wild ding dong in sparring and touch gloves and be best mates, and then want to go out afterwards and socialize and all the rest of it. So, and then it just becomes normal, doesn't it? You know, I then went to uni down in Cornwall. It was Falmouth College of Arts at the time. Did my journalism degree down there. Actually,
Why journalism? Why journalism? Of all the things you could have done.
So there were two things really. But the main thing was, I think I wanted to be like a serious news journalist. Like I thought I could see myself being on the front line in wars and going out and doing that with the flat jackets and stuff, which is weird because the military thing never really appealed to me.
Do you think that goes back to this darkness that you've always sought after?
Yeah, maybe. And I think there was an element
and the pain, you put yourself through training every single day. There's something inside you, Tris, that is so captivating and like, yeah, just really interesting.
Yeah, I think there was always an acceptance of wanting to put myself in harm's way as well. And maybe that had come from, you know, whatever it was, whether it was, you know, I'll give my brother a shout out here, beating the shit out of me when I was a kid as well. But that gives you a certain type, you know, probably any younger brother can accept that or understand that, you know, that you take some shoe-ins on the way through, right? I mean, our fights were like, you remember Itchy and Scratchy from The Simpsons?
Do I?
It was like cartoon violence, right? I remember him hitting me over the head with a bowling ball once. I stuck a pencil through his knee. Oof. Like we did some wild stuff. I remember he threw me in a ice cold river in the New Forest one January, made me walk home. But yeah, so I mean, but all that's kind of character building. You're like, oh, well, if I can go through that, I'll go through that. So anyway, I wanted to be like a serious news journalist, and it was only actually in my last year at uni, probably fueled by substances I shouldn't have been taking, that I had sort of an epiphany where my old lecturer, Jim Hall, who was a really, really good man, I had nothing to write in my dissertation. And he's like, well, what do you do in your own time? And I'm like, well, I box. He says, well, why don't you do a dissertation that sort of combines writing with boxing? And so then long story short, we came to this this piece where I was, where I wrote about Mike Tyson's representation by the media. And that was my dissertation. And that was really my bridge into writing about boxing and me starting to realize, you know, like I kind of know the journalism stuff and I know the boxing stuff. So like, why can't I bleed them together? That wasn't like the actual thing where like, right, you're off to the races, I'm going to be a boxing writer. But that was certainly the first bit where they sort of intertwined.
The first spark. Well, thank you, Jim Hall, from British Boxing and World Boxing. I want to thank Jim Hall for getting you started on your journey. So we could talk. I told you, you're a really fascinating man. I've got a whole page here on my notes page. We're on the third line. How'd you get into journalism? So like, there's so much to get through because you're so fascinating as a bloke. So I know you've done some mad, crazy stuff that you just throw away like it's nothing. We all think our own lives are just because they're our own lives. We know it, but you've done some really, really cool stuff. How, and if I'm missing big gaps in between, please feel free to jump in and tell me stuff. But you spent years in America being a boxer, being a sparring partner, being a journalist. That 2, 3, 4, 5 year period, can you talk to me about that, please? And like what that meant to you? What it did?
It's funny. I mean, again, solitude, isolation, darkness, struggle. Weirdly now, like I have so much fondness for those days though. Like when you think I was on my own at school, I hated it. I then had the freedom out in America and loved it and embraced it. And I don't know if you can relate to that with what you've done with AEW and your travels through fighting, but like it was weird, I suppose, because I still didn't really have loads of friends back home. And like, I don't know, I just loved it. But the whole point of going over was to make a career for myself in boxing. I just didn't know as what. I remember I went out there with a business card and it said, Tris Dixon, amateur boxer, boxing trainer, boxing journalist. So I remember I started off the journey at Kevin Rooney's gym in the Catskills, right? Mike Tyson's old trainer. Mm-hmm. And I went to be trained by Kevin, and I gave him this boxing card, and he looked at it, and he's like, "What the fuck are you?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but I'm here for something."
How long did you train with Kevin for?
I was with Kevin like 3 or 4 months, something like that.
What was that like? You must listen. So for those that aren't boxing fans, there'll be people who aren't boxing but listen to this podcast. So the man that kind of helped guide Mike Tyson to become Mike Tyson, Iron Mike, that we all know and many love, he trained you.
Yeah, so,
that's so cool.
Yeah, it was. So Kevin at that point, you know, liked to drink, liked to gamble. He wasn't at the gym all the time. In itself, there were lots of lessons, and it was a great experience there. So I went to Catskill, and I mean,
North New York.
That's right, about 4 hours north of New York City.
Yeah.
So like out in the sticks, in the mountains. And we had a little stable of fighters. There was a heavyweight called Andrei Kopylov who would fight Devarel Touch of Sleep Williamson. We had Leonard Pierre who would fight Kelly Pavlik and John Duddy. We had Jay Krupp, a pro from New Orleans who would headline on ESPN. We had little old me who would do absolutely nothing. But Kevin was like hit and miss at the gym. But it was an amazing experience. So I went there. I'd sold my car and I was like, going to stay in America for as long as I could. This was pre-9/11, so visa's not quite as stringent and all the rest of it. And I was like, well, let's see it out and just see how long I can make it last.
How old are you at this point?
Like 20, 21.
So a massive step for a young man to take.
Yeah, didn't even think about it. You know, it was never a thing. It was like, well, I've got nothing to do at home. These job rejection letters are coming in thick and fast. Let's get out and, you know, see if I can make something happen. The idea actually was to go and see Angelo Dundee and to Eddie Futch and to travel around to all these places. But when I got to Catskill...
Who are those people?
Angelo Dundee trained Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard down in Miami, the Fifth Street Gym. Eddie Futch trained Joe Frazier and, you know, like 30 or 40 other world champs. And they were still living. In fact, I did get to meet them. In fact, on that trip at the Hall of Fame, there was a really surreal moment where I was sat down having... a drink with Angelo Dundee, Eddie Futch, and the great Cuban Kid Gavilan. They've all passed away now. And I was like thinking, talk about imposter syndrome. Like that was even before I'd written a word about boxing.
Yeah. I'll give you that one. You can have imposter syndrome for that one.
So, but anyway, so I'm at Kevin's, and I remember him saying like, "Where are you staying?" I'm like, "I've got nowhere to stay." This was on the phone. And I'm like, but I'm here now. He's like, well, I'll send someone to come and get you. You sent me Andre, his big heavyweight, to get me. And he took me he's like, how much money have you got? I was like, nothing. And he says, well, you know, I'll take you to the cheapest place in town. And he took me to the Catskill Motel. And they were like charging like 90 a night. I'm like, I'm going to have to go home at the end of the week. Like, I haven't got that kind of money. I agreed to deal with them for like 150 for the week, something like that. And that obviously bought me a week there. And I was going to the gym and training and made friends with Jay and Leonard in particular. Andre had his fight coming up. But I did like Andre and his wife at the time. And Leonard I was particularly close with. But after about a week there, I'd obviously had nothing to do but train. I didn't have a job or anything. So I was walking around the village. I love the whole Mike Tyson story at that age. And like, Cus D'Amato, the trainer, talked about fear and how like you need fear, you need to be able to control it. And I'd never really heard anyone talk about pre-fight fear in an interview before, but Cus was great talking about it. And you all know before a fight you shit yourself, right? And no one ever told me that nerves are normal before you box. So remember before my fights, I thought what was happening to me was unique to me, and that it was just me struggling to contain nerves. And it wasn't down to that. It was obviously just that everyone gets it. It's just, as Cus would say, heroes and cowards both experience fear. It's how you react to it that defines you. So I would go and look at Mike's old house where he lived with Cus. I went to Cus's gravesite, and then I found this resort, Forlini's, and it was like a kind of rundown resort. And it had a pool, and the owner, Freddie Forlini, who sadly passed away a few years ago, was an elderly gent then. And he took me under his wing and let me stay there. And there was like an outhouse, and I stayed in the outhouse. And I remember my weekly food shop was a loaf of bread, a packet of sliced American cheese, and a packet of sliced ham. And I bought a polystyrene water cooler, would fill it up with ice from the bar in the resort, and I would put my bread and my turkey and my cheese and my ham in there. And I remember I would have a sandwich a day, and on the days I sparred, I'd have a cheese and ham sandwich. And on the days I didn't spar, I'd have a cheese or ham sandwich. Like, so the reward was like, I'd double up. But Freddie let me stay there, like comparatively cheaply, on the exchange that I just helped around. And so I would go and get ice for the girls for the bar that was there. I would cut the grass, and like they had a pool, so I mean I didn't use it much, but I could use the pool, and yeah, like it was weird. Like I quickly got an identity because it's only a small village where people are like, oh my God, like people were doing interviews with me like, oh my God, you're the English fighter, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not that good. But people like it's funny. I just felt like part of the fabric there in a short space of time, and then me and Leonard were pretty close. I remember. You know, we would clean the gym, like it hadn't been cleaned for ages. And that gym was basically a museum. Like all the cuttings of Mike's career were on the walls. They were all yellowed and faded because obviously we're 15, 20 years removed from there. And one of the best things about that whole experience was anyone who idolized Customato the way that I did at the time, who obviously trained, he was the guy that really found Mike and created what he became. He also trained Floyd Patterson and Jose Torres, two former world champs. And I was all invested in that story at the time, is when Kevin wasn't there, or even when he was there, he'd say, like, put on a tape player. There was a cassette player. And you learn over there the Tyson punches numbered 1 to 9. And you put in the tape player, and on it is Cuss calling out the combinations, from beyond the grave. And it was just it was amazing nostalgia. Yeah. And I became okay, I became a decent fighter, I felt there. And I sort of learned the Tyson peekaboo system. I had some pretty bad back issues there at the time, which was stopping me moving my upper body as well. Which was, meant sometimes in sparring that was hurting less to get punched in the face than it was to move out the way, which wasn't great.
Man, I've been there with my Achilles. My Achilles used to hurt me more. When I was boxing for a couple of year period, I was sparring with Frotch. I boxed Wayne Reed, and I banged him out in the 5th round. But in the 3rd round, he threw a big loop southpaw, big overhand right hook, and I saw it coming, and I said to myself, I should move because it's going to clock me. I'm not going to block it. And I thought, I'm not going to, because the pain in you snapped both of yours. I've done both of mine. The pain in my Achilles was so bad, I thought, I'm just going to take this punch. And I'm now willingly at a point in my life where I was taking punches to the head rather than moving my feet because it hurt so much. So I know exactly what you mean. When you say that, I know exactly what you mean. It's not a nice place to be where you'd rather get hit in the head rather than move because you're in that much pain. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's cool. But I was so studious there because obviously I had nothing else to do. And I remember Jay, this kid from New Orleans, he was quite distracted. I remember Kevin saying to me, like, oh, he's got talent, but he's not got the application. He's like in with a bad crowd and all the rest of it. And I remember sparring Jay that we think we sparred a few times, but I remember one day, it was right near the end because I left as a consequence. And I remember, like, I had been so diligent learning the numbers and the combinations. And I remember I was obviously in the away corner in the spar, and Jay was in the home corner, and Kevin was in his corner, and I had no on my side. Put my mouthpiece and went into the ring. And I remember Kevin calling out the numbers for Jay. And Jay, whether he was distracted or he wasn't as invested as I was. So Kevin was calling out these numbers, and I was hitting Jay with the combinations. And Kevin was getting pissed. And I'm thinking, this is really good. Like, he's going to say, like, oh, you can stay, and you're really good, and all the rest of it. And every time Jay was going back to the corner, and he was like saying, Jay, this kid's only been here like a few weeks, and you're letting him do this to you. And I was like, okay, but I'm ready for my praise now. And we did 3 or 4 rounds. After everything, he was like just blowing up Jay, and I'm like,
I've been there.
And I'm like, give me some flowers, like this. And the thing was as well, like, I never thought I was a good boxer. I never thought I could make it. But that day, like, I wish I had it on tape because, I mean, it wasn't exactly Muhammad Ali against Cleveland Williams, which is meant to be one of the all-time great displays.
His greatest performances of all time,
But like, for me, I was like, shit, like, I don't remember getting hit by anything. I remember, like, preempting everything that he did and, having my own success. And more to the point, like, I definitely didn't get filled in. And I remember, like, thinking that was great. And then I remember, like, I don't think even Kevin looked at me, just took my gloves off, or Leonard maybe came and took my gloves off. And that was it. And I was like, you know, I just don't belong here. I've done everything. I've cleaned the gym. I've been there. Like when Kevin's not been in the gym, I've been off running with the guys. You know, I've been a bit of a punch bag for Leonard, who gave me a concussion that I didn't lose for like basically the whole of that summer. And I just thought, like, I'm putting a lot in here, and I can't see, like, he's not even talked about me having a fight, amateur or pro, whatever. You know, I would have taken whatever, like, to be a part of that. And like, I'm going to have to move down. I'd been to the Hall of Fame a couple of weeks before the International Boxing Hall of Fame, slept rough at the International Boxing Hall of Fame for like 3 nights. So I could go there, like, and just try and meet some people. Fortunately, I've met a guy that I traded VHS tapes with over the years, like as a boxing anorak. And the guy lived in Syracuse, and he put me up for like the remaining night. I remember sleeping under a big sign that says warning, like bears are nearby, on my first night there.
And again, Trish, you've just said something which is so powerful. We could hone it. We haven't got time because there's loads we want to talk about. We could hone on that. You slept rough in New York, of all places, for a few nights under a sign that says warning bears are around. And mate, that's so mad to do that for a dream. It's unbelievable. But please continue.
But no, I suppose that's kind of where things were. Like, so basically my existence became, I mean, I was going to go train with Mickey Ward, the great Lowell body puncher. And I wanted to learn his left hook to the liver. We're moving on a couple of chapters here. There've been a couple of months in Atlantic City, living pretty rough in the ghettos there.
And that's naughty, isn't it? Atlantic City is really dodgy
bad. Well, I remember going to see Mickey, and Mickey said to me, and I told him exactly where I was staying, because it was near the Power Gym, which was in the proper ghetto. And Mickey said to me, "When was the last time you saw a white guy?" Because you know, it's a whole black area. And that Mickey was like the first white guy I'd seen in months. Anyway, Boxing News had heard through a friend of mine, Phil Rooney, an Irish guy that I'd stayed in touch with in Amesbury. I used to write him letters from America, a much older guy. They'd heard that I was going to go train with Mickey, and they reached out to me in Atlantic City and said, this was just after Ward Gatti won one of the great fights. And they said, oh, if you're going up to see him, can you do an interview with him for us? And literally everything changed then. That was really probably the eureka moment where Tony Connolly, the assistant editor of Boxing News, called me and said, can you interview Mickey Ward? Because then the trip was nothing about going to the gym and boxing with him. It was about doing a piece. So instead of going up there and staying up there, I went up there. Mickey picked me up from the bus station, went to his house, did an interview. He dropped me back at the bus station. The bus journey was like overnight back to Atlantic City. So I was in and out in a day. And I got back to the library in Atlantic City and typed up the interview as fast as I could, sent it off. And they said, well, that's great. Like, we really like it. While you're out there, who else can you get? And like, I've been in America for a couple of years by that point. And I said about some of the old names, and they really liked the old names. They jumped off the page to them.
Old names like, remember 2 or 3?
Like Jimmy Young, Harold Johnson, Jeff Chandler, like old guys from the 50s, 60s and 70s. Yeah. And so then basically the next 2 years of my life became working the doors in England and trying to make enough money to go out there to buy a Greyhound bus ticket so I could do like 30 or 40 days at a time to try and find these old-time fighters. And so I would buy a Greyhound bus ticket. I would have like, I couldn't tell you less than no money, but I was in my overdraft every time I went out there. And I would just travel. Like in those 30 or 40 days, maybe I would spend 3 nights in a bed. The rest were on the road, homeless, rough.
How old are you at this
bus stations? Like early 20s, 22, 23. And the thing was, so I obviously, because I'm a student of the game, I knew where everyone lived, where these old fighters were. And I had a friend called Tom Jess, who's still a great friend today, who's an autograph collector. So he would have the old addresses for these fighters. And he gave me like the addresses and sometimes a phone number. But this is in the day before mobile phones.
GDPR, mate. They'd be having him. They'd be onto him, wouldn't they? Giving out addresses.
So I had the addresses, and I would go and knock on doors. And literally, you know, I'd be like, oh my God, I haven't slept for 3 days. Where can I go that's 3 days away so I can just sleep on the bus and not be properly interrupted? Obviously, on a bus, you get kicked out in the middle of the night. You've got 3-4 hour layovers, but you can crash out of the bus station. They don't kick you out of the bus station. You can stay in the bus station, so you got a place to crash out. I remember sleeping rough under the Atlantic City Boardwalk. I remember sleeping under the Brooklyn Bridge. I remember sleeping rough in Indianapolis in a doorway. I remember going to Salt Lake City and it just being absolutely freezing there. But yes, I would just move geographically. So I would be like,
what were you thinking? Obviously,
I had nowhere else to be and nothing else to do. And also, like, some of these guys were so happy to be remembered. Like, it would keep me motivated and inspired. And I remember, like, George Chavallo I interviewed in Toronto in a coffee shop. And then I remember being so tired. I was like, how can I just get, like, some proper sleep? And I was like, well, look, who do I know in Miami? It's like 3 days away. And I would then go and I'd find someone in Miami, like Florentino Fernandez, a great middleweight from the 60s, and go and look for him. And that's how it went. And I would be like, you know, well, what's the next city across? So then I'd be going from there up to Indianapolis, and I'd be going to like Chicago and on to Salt Lake City and down to Vegas and then back up via Cincinnati, and just trying to work out like how far these major cities were away, trying to find these guys that had vanished and just having an address, and sometimes showing up on the door, people not being in, just getting back on a bus and moving again, or waiting for hours to see if someone would come back, or trying to door knock some neighbours and ask, you know, who's around.
No mobile phones, no Instagram, no DMs,
no GPS, nothing. You know, no map, no Google Maps, nothing. Just trying to find my way around. And some of these places are rough. Like you said about Atlantic City, actually, you got a perfect thing there, actually. When I walked around in Atlantic City, I was boxing at the time, and I was boxing in the PAL, some good fighters, Shimon Alvarez, Levander Johnson, who became world champ, Ray Mercer, Virgil Hill. Like, I was in the gym with all these guys, Al Cole, good world champs and stuff, in the Pleasantville Rec and in the PAL. And I remember walking around thinking I was bulletproof, and like, also not really caring if anything happened to me. Also not really caring if anyone robbed me because I had nothing to rob, because I had no money, no phone or anything else. If anyone nicked my bank card, they could pay off my overdraft for me if they wanted. And I remember walking around thinking, like, not like I own this place, but not really giving a fuck. Do you know what I mean? Like, thinking whatever. And weirdly, I went back to Atlantic City in like 2012, and I'm older, I've got kids. I'm the editor of Boxing News, and I'm there to watch Froch against Glenn Johnson. And I think, oh, let's go and see my mates back in the ghetto. And I walk back there, and after like 2 blocks back from the ball where it starts to get a bit seedy, I'm like, shit, like this is scary. And now I'm like almost breaking into a run, and I'm thinking, it's the same place where I walked around absolutely fearless before, but like you have kids, you grow up a little bit, and you're like, yeah, this isn't where I need to be. It's weird. Nothing had changed apart from me and my mindset.
Than you, mate. It's funny you say this in a much more normal situation. I remember being 17 on my first lads' holiday, and we took out mopeds. No helmet, no nothing. Never been a moped before. And I had my mate Chapo, who sadly passed away since. He always had dirty fingernails. He's clinging to me, and I was giving him a backie on this moped, doing 50 miles an hour it's so hot in Turkey that the roads are shiny, and I'm razzing around this little moped just like a lunatic. If I come off, I'm dead. We're both dead. Like, there's no two ways about it. And at the time, it was a laugh. It was a giggle because I was 17. I would never. Even when I use a bicycle now, I put a helmet on. Isn't that funny how things change? Obviously, yours is way more extreme. I mean, I lived in America for the last 3 years now, and it's a very divisive place. So I know exactly what you meant about the black faces and the white faces thing you said earlier. Because like I walk through towns and cities now, and you have white areas and you have black areas. It's still quite segregated in many aspects, and I'm classed as black. I'm mixed, but I'm classed as black in America. And I walk through a white town, people look at you. And and vice versa. So I understand how mad of a time it must have been for you.
I mean, I remember walking through Philly, and by the way, so obviously I wrote a book called The Road to Nowhere.
Which you're going to talk about. I want to get to your books.
Well, it's kind of all in there, right? So, and it is about me being this hobo. But I remember when my son was born in 2006, we were moving house. And I had all these photos of all these old fighters that I'd had developed, because obviously this was on the old point and shoot photos. And I had all my old luggage tags of the stops I'd made. And I thought one day, like, this kid that's about to be born might say, what are you doing with like these 60, 70 pictures of old fighters? and all these luggage tags. So then I started writing this book, not for publication, but just thinking one day he might know. And before my memory fades, I want him to know about the journey. So I started writing The Road to Nowhere. And it wasn't published for years. I didn't even try and get it published for years because it was just for my son.
Yeah.
But that kind of documents all that. But yeah, going back to the crazy stuff, like I remember, and I think this is in that book as well, I remember walking through a really rough town in Germantown in Philadelphia, really rough area. I remember getting there and Jeff Chandler was like looking around, like thinking, how did you get here? I'm like, I walked. And he's like, was that bad for you? I'm like, well, there was this moment. And I walked past this abandoned building and two guys came out and they both had guns and they both pointed the guns at me as if to say like, bang, bang. And I remember thinking at the time, like, you know, as if like, threaten me for what? And that was my mindset. Like, I'm not trying to be hard. I literally thought, like, you've literally picked the poorest person. I'm poorer than the people who've got houses here. I've got nothing. Like, do what you want, do what you need to me, but like, I've got nothing. Anyway, like nothing ever happened. And, but yeah, it's weird. Like, mindset changes over time.
So, mate, as I mentioned earlier, it's such an inspiring story. I know bits of this. Such an inspiring story. You went from this to the heights of British boxing publication. Nobody can begrudge you of your success that you've had, and you will have in the rest of your career, because the stuff you went through at this period now is just very inspiring. You went from that, and you became the editor of Boxing News, one of, if not the most famous box magazines in the world. So that could be deemed as a great success. So it is a massive, huge success, a huge honour. I know at that point your life was also, I've heard you use the words, crumbling around you. How'd you manage that?
In all honesty, I don't really know that I did. Really rough period. Like joining Boxing News was a dream come true. I left being the editor of a local paper I left the top job at a local paper for the bottom job at Boxing News. Because obviously I just wanted to get in there. And I remember the first 2 or 3 years were great. And, I was just a writer, senior writer, helped develop the website a bit. And it was great. But then, I alluded to the stuff about my marriage earlier. Like my marriage, in essence, finished on like the Christmas Eve. And I walked into that job as the editor on New Year's Day. And so I remember everyone slapping me on the back. I remember going to a Maloney show up in Stoke, and it was a bit like The Godfather. People were like lining up to shake your hands because you're the editor of the job. You're like now the made man. And I'm just thinking,
one of the most powerful men in boxing.
One of the most powerful roles. Yeah, I would say. But yeah, but then obviously behind the scenes, it was carnage. Like I didn't want to be home, couldn't really be home, was so uncertain, and I was it was just a really, really rough period, and I couldn't really get my head around any of it, and like the magazine was going through loads of changes at the time. We actually. You might remember we had to bring in another magazine called Fight and Fit, which was like a bi-monthly first fitness magazine for MMA and boxing, which did really well for a time. So then my workload was doubled, trebled with a new publication. The website was growing and growing. We then had social media. We were doing video. We were doing podcasts. The Boxing News editor's job used to be a column a week, maybe a couple of previews. And now, like, it's everything. And I've got this turmoil at home, which is just, absolutely horrendous, almost indescribable. I've got 2 young kids that I'm not spending anywhere near as much time with them as I'd like to. And I want to spend time with them and I want to be with them. And I'm completely torn up by not being able to do that. So, and then there was the because you obviously can't tell. You're not just going to have a chat with people you don't know. When people say, "Oh, things must be great as the editor," his dream job and all the rest of it. Firstly, the job and behind the scenes, it was carnage. Then my actual life was carnage, and then the job wasn't actually what people thought. Like, for me, it was like everyone thinks, "Oh, you get to go to the best fights and all the rest of it." Well, for a start, obviously, as a dad that was separating, you have 26 weekends in a year where you can't go anywhere. because you've got your kids that weekend. So instantly, any fights that fall on those weekends, you can't go to. You've got to send someone else to. Then obviously you got all the other stuff where you're trying to, you got to turn it down because you have that opportunity to be with your children. Yeah. And so whatever it is, they would always come first. So like a lot of the stuff I didn't do and wouldn't do because in case it closed the door on me being able to see the kids properly. So, it for the right guy, it can probably be a dream job. But for me at the time, it was really rough, to the point now where I don't even think I've blocked it off. I just don't have a load of memory for it. Like that period of time, 2010 to 2015, I would really struggle to recall a social moment to you or a holiday. What I could tell you is who fought who was on the undercard, where the fight was. And maybe that is because I threw myself into my work a little bit. But maybe it's because I was in such a bad place. It's just like a blur now, and I think that was it. Like unequivocally, they were the darkest days of my life. Like they were like literally, suicide was in the next room.
What stopped you?
One time when I was very, very close, a phone call from my brother, when the phone literally went, and I'm like, okay, maybe that's a sign. I don't know. It's a tough one. You wouldn't say bottle. You wouldn't say you bottled it, right? I don't think that's the right thing to say because I don't think people go through it with it for any number of reasons. But I didn't want to lose, and that's not necessarily a winner's mentality. But I thought I was better than the situation I was in, and I deserved better. Like I do think fundamentally, like I'm a decent bloke, and I think I had more to offer my kids. I think I have more to offer, full stop. Like, and I didn't think my journey was over. I always said, like, from a professional perspective as well, like, I want boxing to be in a better place when I finished than when I started. And I didn't think I contributed enough to make a massive change. I did feel like when I wrote War and Peace with Ricky Hatton, I did feel like maybe that was my goal to like help him. He was going through a really rough time at that period. And I did think, after that was done, I was like, maybe that is why I've been put on this earth, to like help Ricky navigate that year or so. And maybe that was it. I actually think I think I have a greater purpose than that. But after each big project, I think, well, was that it? I don't think that's it.
I've heard you say in an interview, you believed you were put on this earth to do something great. And then things happened in your life, and then you went through a transitional period, and then you realised, in your own words, you're just a piece of dust, and you're on this earth to enjoy time here like anybody else. Do you still feel that way, or do you feel like you have a purpose, a meaning to be here?
Good question. Both. I think it would be a waste if you didn't feel like you have a purpose. And I think we all have a purpose in some way, shape or form, whether it's to help yourself or to help others. Leaving Boxing News at the end of 2014, start of 2015 was crucial for me because it allowed me to get off the treadmill. Like I was on the treadmill of work, of life, and it was relentless. Thinking 3-4 hours of sleep a night was normal, and just thinking I'm one of those guys that doesn't need much, and wasn't looking after myself, like didn't understand about nutrition the way I understand it now, or sleep or recovery. And when I left, I moved out into the country, owned a gym, bought a gym, a CrossFit gym, got a dog, and life changed and everything changed. And do you know what changed? The change came from the pursuit of happiness, because happiness is not a real or sustainable goal. Like if you're looking for happiness, you're in the wrong place. That's a crap advert for this podcast, isn't it? But I don't think happiness is something you should strive for, because if you strive for happiness, why stop there? Why wouldn't you strive for 24-hour-a-day euphoria, right? Why would you settle for happiness? I don't think happiness is something that you get. It's a derivative from something else. It's an emotion that you get. You invited me on this podcast, made me happy, right? Like that is as flattering as it is. provokes happiness within me. But but that's not sustainable. When I leave and walk out and no one wants me, I'm not going to be happy, right? I'll be happy I've done it, I suppose, right? But what you need, or what I need, is contentment. And that is what the search is, right? When I can go around and walk my dogs and I don't have promoters from around the world phoning me, and I don't have deadlines to meet, and I don't have, a divorce that's dominating the front part of my brain 99% of the time, and I'm not aching for my kids the way that I used to ache for them because, I see them all the time. Like, the contentment is what I've been looking for, where I can just be. And again, going back to where we talked about this solitude and loneliness, that's where I can be, and I'm not tormented, and I'm not happy, I'm just at peace. And that peacefulness is something I think people should strive for, because I don't think happy is a realistic aim. Like, if people say, oh yeah, I'm really happy, that's great, I'm pleased for you. I won't say I'm happy for you, I'm pleased for you. But really, my happiness comes from being content and not wanting more and not wanting anything. I have a very quiet life. I think I suppose the best way of describing it is if I have maybe 6 test tubes and I can't fill them all up to be a 10 out of 10, but if I can fill them all up to be like a 7 out of 10 every month, then I'll be okay. And that means spending time with my dogs, it means spending time with my wife, not in that order. It means training, it means enjoying my work, it means spending time with my kids, and spending time with my friends. And if I can keep them balanced, then that will lead me to be content. And that's what I think, for me, that's what's important, because I realized, when I talk about being dust, and when I talk about whether it's leaving a legacy or wanting to leave boxing in a better place, which is slightly different because I think that's very achievable. When you really look back on history and look at the people who've made a massive, massive difference to the world, you're probably going to be struggling to get beyond 2 hands in terms of the amount of people you can count. So to get into that area, I don't think it's wholly realistic. I'm not saying we shouldn't strive to be our best. Of course we should. But in terms of changing the world, my ideas have changed, but I might be able to change my corner of the world, which is what I'm trying to do with boxing, trying to be a force for good in boxing.
You said that to me a number of years ago about the contentment. And that hit. And I'm so glad you covered it as well as you did with me all those years ago. So thank you. And I'm very happy you came on today. And there's still some more I want to talk about. Wolf, your divorce, I know it hit you so hard. And there'll be people listening to this going through a divorce and people struggling, going through difficult relationships. What can you say to those people that want to give up, that are going through divorces? What advice can you give them?
Stay in the fight. Definitely stay in the fight. There were moments when, I freely admit I didn't want to stay in the fight. I did want to, in boxing cliches, throw in the towel. I had no idea that Johanna, my wife, would be, round the corner. But I'm not, not round the corner. We're talking years and years on now. But, I would never have thought.
Did you think you're never going to be happy again? Content again, in a place of your life where you could just feel? No. I had in many ways. So in many ways, I was accepting of, I'm just on my own now. There was a period of time where I was very accepting of that, thinking this is it, and that's fine. I don't mind my own company. Obviously, I think we've established that. I don't mind. I don't make myself crazy. I don't overthink things. I don't dwell on things. Going back to the school thing, if I'm the most unpopular person in the room, then I used to think that was crap. Now, if I'm the most unpopular person in the room, I don't really care. It is what it is. Yeah, because I think I'm okay. Do you know what I mean? If people don't like me, that's okay. You can't like everyone, and you certainly can't please everyone. And I think the minute you start trying to please everyone, you're on a pretty shoddy foundation, right? Because, you can't. It's just impossible. So,
Yeah, I would say stay in the fight because you can't predict what's going to be around the corner. And it might take a while, but maybe it takes the amount of time it takes because you need to heal properly before you can experience that kind of stuff again. And before you let people experience those sort of emotions and that kind of stuff again. Like, everything is a process. Like, our lives are not designed to be a sprint. You know, everything is a process and you go through stages of life and, you know, God, we've covered them here, right? Highs, lows, everything in between. And when you're looking at these periods, like when you're looking at my low periods, you're looking at years, right? You're looking at eras. You know, you're looking 13 to 16, 30 to 35. Like even that period in America where I was struggling, you know, sometimes going 2.5 days without food and loving the hunger, literal physical hunger, as in borderline probably developing some sort of eating disorder because I was thinking, well, if I've gone 2 days without food on this day, I can go 2.5 days the next time. Like when I think of these periods of pain and struggle, like they're years. And fortunately, like, you know, people, and the thing is, these are largely internal struggles, right? You know, some people are dealt cards far harder than the ones I've had. You know, people who've got really bad illnesses in the family and, you know, suffer real tragedies and horrible things. Like, God, I've lost a lot of people. Like, it's really, in my family, it's only my mum and my brother left. Everyone else is gone. But, like, sadly, that's normal, right? Sadly, you know, as Customato would say, you know, life is cruel. Little by little, everyone's taken away from us. But that again is normal. Like, there's no point me trying to be a victim. Like I said, people have it infinitely harder than me. People have had it infinitely harder than me. So stay in the fight because it might be shit this week. It might be bad next week, and it might be bad next year. I hate to say it, but the year after that, it might be okay. And also, one thing I've learned as well very recently is just because you have a shit 5 minutes in a day doesn't mean the rest of the day is a waste either. Like, that's something that I've only just really thought about. You know, sometimes I would chalk it off and think, oh yeah, that day's gone to pot now. It hasn't. Like, there's still plenty of time left in the day.
In boxing, you have a bad round. Doesn't mean you've lost a fight. You've had a bad
100%.
round. Crack on again. There's 11 more rounds to go. Tris, this is fantastic. I say about the Instagram thing because you look like you have a lovely life, a wonderful wife, beautiful kids. You walk your dog, you train. Like, what more do you want? Like, really, if you strip it all to bare, like, what more do you want? Would you say your family, super quickly, would you say your family were your greatest achievement?
Oh yeah, definitely. And you know, I would put my wife in there as well.
Yeah, oh no, your wife, your family, yeah,
like
100%.
you know, she's amazing. And she, like, it's cliche, but she wants me. She makes me want to be better. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want to do stuff that makes her proud. Obviously, I want to do stuff that makes the kids proud as well. Like, I want them, you know, and that going to the Instagram thing. I know that they're friends at school. They might be 16 and 14. But I know that they've got kids at school. I know I'm not an embarrassment. I might not be a cool dad, but I know I'm a freaking unit by comparison to the other dads. And you know, that's something that they can, you know, they're not embarrassed by that. And that's cool. And that's another part of it, you know. And a big thing is me trying to stay fit and healthy into old age. And that's what I'm trying to achieve, trying to keep going and trying to stay in this fight, stay on the journey for as long as I possibly can.
Tris, I've enjoyed this talk as much, if not more, than I thought I would. I think you've already answered the question, but anybody going through a tough time now, going through adversity, have you got any advice for them?
Yeah, just keep going. Just keep going.
Stay in the fight.
Yeah, and you know, I broke that down into a microcosm. Like, 5 minutes doesn't make a bad day. A bad year doesn't make a bad life. 2 years doesn't make a bad life. 3 years doesn't. I can't bitch and moan about my poor hand or anything that I've gone through because people have it infinitely worse. And you might be going through a shit period, but it's not going to always be like that. And you can not only come out the other side, but you can meet people that will help change your perspective and give you an added meaning and incentive for life.
Mate, so where can people follow you? Where can they follow you? You've got your own podcast, Boxing Life Stories. That's brilliant. Obviously, you talk to people about their life stories, and it's fantastic. I've been on it. You know, it's an amazing podcast. Please listen to it. Your books, Damage, Road to Nowhere. We've got War and Peace.
War and Peace with Ricky Hatton. We've got Money, which is about the life and times of Floyd Mayweather. And most recently, Warrior, which is about Matthew Saad Muhammad, who was a light heavyweight champ that I was actually living with in Atlantic City back in those incredibly poor days from sort of 2001 to 2004-ish. And we agreed to write his book actually in 2001, and then when the pandemic came, I revisited it. He passed away in 2014. But that's a really meaningful book to me as well. Other than that, just at Tris Dixon on Instagram and Twitter, and it's been an absolute privilege, mate. I really appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk to you.
You're very, mate. It's been wonderful, and let's get a workout in together soon.
Let's do that. Yeah. As long as it doesn't involve me doing any kind of moonsault or breaking my neck or anything, that'll be great.
What a guy Tris Dixon is. What a lovely, lovely bloke. One of the nicest men I've met in boxing and just met in general. A top bloke. I mean, he spoke so powerfully about some hard-hitting things, and he's somebody that we're definitely going to have on the podcast again because he's got so much more. Like, some of the things that we didn't even cover about Tris and Tris's career is incredibly inspiring. So, Tris, thank you so much, mate. Next week, we've got a really special guest on the podcast, Mitchell Greenaway. She was my therapist for a long time, so it's going to be very interesting. Oh, how the tables have turned. I'll be the one asking her the questions. Incredibly inspiring. Teenage mother, raised 3 kids, created businesses with no real qualifications. Honestly, her story is a really, really powerful one. This podcast isn't always about success. It isn't always about success, what you think success is. It's not always about earning millions of pounds or winning world titles or Olympic medals. What is success? It's having a goal and achieving it. Now, Mitchell is as inspiring as a person as anybody in my contact list. She's inspired me massively, and I'm sure she's going to inspire you too. So make sure you tune in next week and every week thereafter. If you feel like any of the topics that we spoke about in today's podcast can really help somebody, then please send the podcast to them so they can listen and learn and grow from the conversation we've just now had. If you enjoy this podcast, please like, please share, please subscribe so you get the podcast bright and early next week. I really want this podcast to grow and to be something really big to help as many people as possible.